Welcome back, you terrifying contradiction. Yes, you. The one scrolling right now with that half smile, that knowing look, that quiet fire behind your eyes that makes people uncomfortable without them understanding why. I need you to stop for a second and actually listen to this, because something just happened that you might not have noticed yet, but everyone around you absolutely felt it. The air shifted. The temperature dropped 3 degrees when you walked into that room last week. Conversations paused mid-sentence. Eyes flickered with something that looked like recognition but tasted like fear. And you just smiled that smile. The one that doesn't reach your eyes anymore. The one that carries a warning label nobody can quite read but everyone instinctively obeys. They tried to touch it, didn't they? Your halo, that beautiful, terrible crown of thorns you've been wearing so elegantly they forgot it could draw blood. They reached up with their careless hands, their entitled fingers, their presumptuous audacity, thinking you were still soft, still accessible, still the version of you that apologized for existing. They thought your kindness was weakness wrapped in pretty paper. They mistook your silence for submission. They confused your peace with surrender. And then, they made contact with the barbed wire, and suddenly their whole reality started bleeding. Suddenly they remembered why they used to be careful around you. Suddenly they understood that your halo isn't decoration, it's a defense system, and they just triggered every alarm you spent years installing. Let me tell you what's really happening here, what's been building beneath the surface. While they were too busy judging your exterior to notice the infrastructure you were constructing in the dark. You didn't just heal from what they did to you. You didn't just recover from the betrayals, the abandonments, the casual cruelties they handed out like party favors. You weaponized every single wound. You turned your scar tissue into armor. You transformed your breaking points into boundaries that don't negotiate, don't bend, don't break the second time. You became something they have no reference point for, something their comfortable little worldview has no category for, something that breaks their pattern recognition software and makes their threat assessment systems scream in languages they don't speak. This isn't about revenge, though they'll call it that, because they need to make sense of why you're suddenly untouchable. This isn't about bitterness, though they'll diagnose you with it, because they need to pathologize what they can't control. This is about evolution at a speed that leaves their understanding in the dust. This is about becoming so authentically, unapologetically yourself, that your very existence becomes an act of rebellion against everything they taught you about staying small, staying quiet, staying convenient for their consumption. Your halo isn't made of light anymore, sunshine. It's made of every promise they broke, every lie they told, every time they underestimated you, melted down and reforged into something beautiful and brutal. And now they're standing there with blood on their hands, literal or metaphorical doesn't matter, staring at you like you're some kind of anomaly, some glitch in the matrix they thought they had programmed perfectly. They're asking each other in whispered conversations and carefully worded text messages, what happened? When did this change occur? How did the person they thought they knew become this thing they can no longer predict, control, or comprehend? The answer is simple, devastating, and something they'll never truly understand. You stopped performing. You stopped pretending. You stopped translating your existence into a language they could digest without choking. You became the unedited version. And the unedited version has teeth. Let's rewind the tape and watch what they've been doing for the past however many months or years you've been in their field of vision. They've been studying you like you're some kind of social experiment, some fascinating case study in human behavior they can dissect and discuss and feel intellectually superior about. They watched how you handled pressure, how you responded to their carefully crafted tests, how you reacted when they pushed your boundaries just to see if you'd push back. They observed your patterns, cataloged your responses, built entire psychological profiles based on the version of you they decided was real. And the whole damn time, you were observing them right back with a precision that would make surveillance experts jealous. You saw everything, didn't you? Every micro-expression that contradicted their words, every tone shift that revealed their true intentions, every little manipulation tactic they deployed thinking you were too naive, too kind, too emotionally invested to notice. You watched them smile to your face while sharpening knives behind your back. You heard them agree with you in person, then contradict you in group chats. You felt them perform friendship, perform love, perform loyalty, and you made mental notes of every single performance flaw. You were building a database, compiling evidence, constructing a complete picture of who these people really were beneath their carefully maintained masks. And you did it all while appearing vulnerable, open, trusting. That was your genius move right there, that decision to let them think they had you figured out while you were reverse engineering their entire operating system. They thought your openness was naivety when it was actually strategic reconnaissance. They mistook your emotional honesty for weakness, when it was you giving them enough rope to reveal exactly who they were. You weren't being fooled, you were gathering data. You weren't being manipulated, you were studying the manipulation techniques so you'd recognize them instantly next time. You weren't losing the game, you were learning the rules so you could rewrite them later. And now that you've completed your research phase, now that you've seen behind every mask and beneath every performance, you've emerged with something they never expected. You've emerged with discernment so sharp it cuts through their nonsense before they finish their first sentence. You've developed an early warning system that detects manipulation the way smoke detectors sense fire before any visible damage occurs. You've cultivated a level of emotional intelligence that makes their attempts at gaslighting look like children trying to convince their parents the sky is green. You see the patterns before they complete. You hear the lies before they finish forming. You feel the shift in energy before they change their expression. You become impossible to fool, impossible to manipulate, impossible to catch off guard. And that reality is what makes them so desperately uncomfortable in your presence now. Because here's what they're realizing in their quiet moments of brutal honesty with themselves. You were never the naive one. You were never the weak link. You were never the easy target they convinced themselves you were. You were the one conducting the experiment. You were the researcher wearing a participant badge. You were the teacher disguised as the student. And now the exam is over. The results are in. And they've all failed spectacularly. They failed the basic humanity test, they failed the loyalty assessment, they failed the integrity examination, and you're standing there with your barbed wire halo, holding their report cards, and your silence is louder than any accusation you could possibly speak. Your knowing look says everything they fear hearing. So let's talk about that moment. That specific crystallized instant when they reached for your halo without permission, without awareness, without any understanding of what they were actually doing. Maybe it was a comment that crossed a line they used to be able to erase with a laugh. Maybe it was an assumption about your availability, your energy, your willingness to accommodate their needs at the expense of your boundaries. Maybe it was them showing up in your space, physical or digital, expecting the welcome mat to still be out when you burned that comfort station down months ago. Whatever the specific trigger was, they made contact with the barbed wire, thinking it was decorative, thinking it was symbolic, thinking it was something they could handle without consequence. The first thing that happened was their confusion. That moment of cognitive dissonance when their expectation of your response and your actual response existed in two completely different universes. They expected soft, they got steel. They anticipated bending, they encountered concrete. They looked for the familiar doorway into your emotional space and found it boarded up, condemned, marked unsafe for occupation. Their smile faltered. Their confidence cracked. Their performance glitched. And in that split second, before they could course correct, before they could deploy their usual recovery tactics, you saw them see you for the first time. Not the version they wanted you to be, not the role they needed you to play, but the actual you that's been under construction this whole time. And that recognition, that involuntary moment of seeing what you've actually become, it triggered something primal in them. Not considering that moment, but in it. Something that operates below conscious thought in the part of the brain that still remembers when survival meant accurately assessing threats. They felt it before they could name it. That understanding that you're not who you were, that the old rules don't apply, that the person standing in front of them has removed every access point they used to have. The psychological doors they used to walk through uninvited are now locked, reinforced, guarded by a version of you that doesn't negotiate, doesn't make exceptions, doesn't open the door just because someone knocks with familiarity. And this realization, this sudden awareness that they've lost access to something they took for granted, it's creating an existential crisis they're not equipped to process. Because what they're experiencing isn't just rejection. Rejection they understand. Rejection fits into their existing framework of human interaction. What they're experiencing is irrelevance. They're experiencing the realization that you don't need them to apologize, don't need them to understand, don't need them to validate or acknowledge or make amends. You've moved past the point where their opinion of you carries any weight in your decision-making process. You've evolved beyond the stage where their presence or absence creates any emotional disturbance in your carefully cultivated peace. They've been demoted from main characters in your story to background extras you don't even notice unless they try to interrupt your scene. And that demotion, that reduction of their significance in your life, it's more devastating than any revenge you could have actively pursued. The barbed wire cut them because they approached with entitlement, expecting soft compliance and finding structured resistance instead. The halo drew blood because they reached for it with hands that had no right to touch something they helped damage in the first place. And now they're standing there, surprised and wounded, acting like you attacked them when all you did was maintain the boundaries you clearly established through your transformed presence. They're confused about why you're not helping them heal from wounds they inflicted upon themselves by ignoring every warning sign your energy was broadcasting. They want you to feel guilty for their injury, to apologize for not being soft enough to protect them from the consequences of their careless contact. But you're just watching them bleed out their own assumptions about who has power here. Now let's discuss what actually happened during the time between when they thought they knew you and this moment where they clearly don't recognize you at all. Let's talk about the metamorphosis they missed because they were too busy not paying attention to anything that didn't directly serve their interests. You didn't announce your transformation. You didn't post about your evolution. You didn't perform your healing for an audience of people who were secretly hoping you'd stay broken. You did it in silence, in solitude, in the private spaces where real change actually occurs, away from the commentary and judgment of people who have opinions about processes they've never experienced themselves. You spent nights sitting with versions of yourself they said were too much, too intense, too difficult, and you made peace with every single aspect they rejected. You reconciled with your anger instead of suppressing it into something more palatable. You befriended your standards instead of lowering them to accommodate mediocrity. You embraced your complexity instead of simplifying yourself into something easily understood by simple minds. You stopped apologizing for taking up space, stopped shrinking to fit into rooms that were too small for your expansion, stopped dimming your intensity so other people could feel bright by comparison. You became unapologetically, uncomfortably, undeniably yourself. And that version is so far removed from who they needed you to be that they're experiencing it as a complete stranger wearing a familiar face. The work you did, the real internal work that doesn't photograph well or translate into inspirational quotes, it fundamentally rewired how you process other people's behavior, other people's words, other people's energy. You develop the ability to observe without absorbing, to witness without internalizing, to experience without becoming. You learn to separate their projections from your reality, their expectations from your obligations, their emergencies from your responsibilities. You built a filtration system that lets in what serves your growth and automatically blocks what drains your progress. And this skill, this capacity to interact with people without letting them infiltrate your inner peace, it's what makes you seem cold to people who are used to you carrying their emotional labor. You also did something they find absolutely unforgivable. You stopped explaining yourself to people who were committed to misunderstanding you. You stopped defending your choices to critics who wouldn't respect them anyway. You stopped justifying your boundaries to people who only questioned them because they wanted to cross them. You stopped participating in conversations designed to make you doubt your own perception of reality. You just stopped, full stop, end of discussion, no further elaboration required. And that withdrawal of your energy from their validation seeking, that refusal to perform for their judgment, it's what they're interpreting as arrogance, when it's actually just self-respect, operating at a frequency they've never accessed themselves. The person you've become doesn't need their approval to exist, doesn't need their understanding to move forward, doesn't need their acceptance to validate your transformation. You've become self-referential. In the most powerful sense of that word, you refer to yourself for truth, for direction, for confirmation that you're on the right path. Their opinions, their judgments, their assessments of your character, they're just noise now, background static that doesn't influence your internal navigation system. You've claimed authority over your own narrative, and that claiming, that reclamation of authorship over your story, it's what makes you terrifying to people who are used to writing your character according to their needs. They can't edit you anymore. They can't revise your responses. They can't script your reactions. You're improvising based on your own truth now, and they have no control over where that truth leads you. Let's address the elephant in the room. The reason they're actually uncomfortable around you now, the thing they'll never admit but you can read in every interaction. You're not just different, you're terrifying in a way that has nothing to do with aggression or hostility. You've become terrifying because you've achieved something most people spend their entire lives avoiding. You've become genuinely okay with being misunderstood, disliked, or dismissed by people whose opinions used to matter to you. You've transcended the need for their good opinion. You've moved beyond the stage where their rejection creates any disturbance in your self-concept. And people who still need approval to feel valid, they don't know how to process someone who's liberated themselves from that particular prison. Your terror factor comes from your stillness, that unshakable calm that makes it clear you're not reactive anymore, not susceptible to their usual manipulation tactics, not available for the drama they're trying to create. They're used to getting responses, any response, because responses mean they still have access, still have impact, still matter in your emotional ecosystem. But you've mastered the art of non-reaction, not from suppression, but from genuine disinterest in engaging with behavior that doesn't deserve your energy. You observe them trying to provoke you. You recognize the patterns, and you just don't take the bait because you've lost your appetite for toxic interaction. That refusal to engage, that ability to witness their attempts without participating in their games, it makes them feel powerless in your presence. They're also terrified because you carry evidence they can't dispute. You carry proof of who they really are beneath their carefully constructed public personas. You were there in the private moments when the masks slipped. You heard what they said when they thought no one was keeping score. You saw who they became when it cost them nothing to show you their real character. And now you walk around carrying that knowledge with a discretion that makes them nervous, because they never know when you might speak, when you might reveal, when you might show other people what you saw. Your silence isn't forgiveness, it's strategy. Your discretion isn't kindness, it's power. And they know the difference, even if they pretend not to. But here's the deepest source of their terror, the thing that keeps them up at night, analyzing your transformation, trying to understand how you pulled it off, wondering if they could somehow replicate what you've achieved. They're terrified because you represent the outcome of a path they were too afraid to take. You walked through the fire they ran from. You faced the isolation they avoided. You did the internal work they keep procrastinating. Wait, hold up. Pause everything. Before we even start, I need you to understand something. Right now, at this exact moment, there are people, real, actual human beings, sitting in rooms, staring at screens, typing your name into search bars with shaking hands. They're refreshing pages, they're scrolling through old posts, they're asking each other in hushed tones, in group chats you'll never see, in conversations you'll never hear, what the hell happened to them. And the crazy part, the absolutely unhinged part, is that they're not asking because they're worried. They're asking because they're terrified, not of what you did, but of what you've become. And nobody, not a single soul, can explain it. Welcome to the aftermath of your evolution, the moment where everything changed and the internet lost its collective mind trying to process what you just pulled off. Let me paint you a picture of what's happening right now while you're watching this. There are comment sections exploding. There are screenshots circulating in private servers. There are people who haven't thought about you in months, maybe years, suddenly choking on their coffee because your name just appeared in their feed again. And it's not because you begged for attention. It's not because you posted some desperate cry for validation. No. You did something far more dangerous. You existed differently. You moved in silence, rebuilt in shadows. and then emerged with an energy so unrecognizable, so disturbingly calm and powerful that it short-circuited every narrative they built about you. They had you figured out, categorized, filed away under predictable, and then you shattered the entire filing cabinet without making a sound. Now they're scrambling, refreshing, investigating, trying to reverse engineer a miracle they'll never understand. Here's what's really messing with their heads. You didn't follow the script. See, when someone goes through hell, when someone gets betrayed, abandoned, humiliated, the world expects a certain pattern. They expect rage or collapse or desperate attempts at revenge or public meltdowns that can be screenshotted and turned into cautionary tales. The system is designed for predictable responses. Pain should make you smaller. Trauma should make you weaker. Isolation should make you desperate. That's the equation. That's how they maintain control. But you took that equation and set it on fire. You took the pain and did something they never anticipated. You transmuted it. You used it like fuel, like raw material, like premium grade psychological gasoline. And now you're walking around with this calm intensity that makes people physically uncomfortable because you're not playing the victim and you're not playing the villain. You're playing a third option. They don't have a category for you. The internet is having an existential crisis over you right now because you represent something they can't market, can't replicate, can't bottle and sell as a course. You're the proof that transformation doesn't require permission, that evolution doesn't need an audience, that power doesn't announce itself with trumpets and press releases. You just became. And that becoming is now rippling through every space you used to occupy, every community that thought they knew you, every person who underestimated what silence and solitude could forge. They're seeing the before and after, and the gap between those two versions is so vast, so incomprehensible, that they're convinced something supernatural happened. They're throwing around words like unrecognizable and completely different person, and I don't even know who that is anymore. And they're right. They don't. Because the version of you they knew died quietly in a room they'll never enter, and what emerged is something they have no reference point for. Let's talk about the chaos you've created just by refusing to perform. You stopped explaining yourself. You stopped defending your choices. You stopped showing up to arguments you never started. You stopped posting your pain for public consumption. You stopped trying to make people understand. And that silence, that refusal to participate in their need to dissect you, has driven them absolutely insane. Because humans hate unsolved mysteries. They hate when someone they thought they could read becomes completely illegible. Your absence from their narratives is louder than any presence could ever be. They're filling that void with speculation, with conspiracy theories about what happened to you, with wild assumptions about your mental state, your motivations, your next move, and the more they talk, the more powerful you become in their minds. You're not a person anymore in their perception. You're a phenomenon. You're the main character in a story they can't stop watching, even though they're not sure if they're scared or impressed. The psychological warfare you're waging right now is masterclass level, and here's the insane part. You're not even trying. You're not strategizing about how to make them uncomfortable. You're not calculating your moves for maximum impact. You're just living in alignment with a version of yourself that doesn't need their validation, their approval, their understanding, or their permission. And that natural, effortless detachment is more threatening than any calculated revenge could ever be. Because revenge requires them to still matter. Detachment proves they never did, You're not fighting them. You're not competing with them. You're not even acknowledging them. And that erasure from your concern is the ultimate power move. They're shouting into a void, and the void is you. Completely unbothered, completely untouchable, completely focused on a reality they're not invited to. Now let's get into what they're actually saying. The specific brand of chaos your transformation has unleashed. There are people who knew you before, who witnessed your struggles, who saw you at your lowest, and they're now looking at current you like you're a glitch in the matrix. They're saying things like, that can't be the same person. They're saying something happened that we don't know about. They're saying they're hiding something. And technically they're right. You are hiding something. You're hiding the version of yourself that used to shrink to make them comfortable. You're hiding the people pleaser who apologized for existing. You're hiding the desperate need for connection that made you tolerate disrespect. You buried those versions so deep that when people interact with you now, they're meeting a stranger who happens to have your name and face. And that cognitive dissonance is breaking their brains. The speculation is running wild in every corner of the internet where your name gets mentioned. Some people think you found wealth. Some people think you found love. Some people think you joined some secret society or unlocked some hidden knowledge. Some people think you had a complete mental breakdown and this is the manic aftermath. Some people think you're faking it, performing some elaborate character, and eventually the mask will slip and you'll go back to being controllable. What none of them realize is that the truth is simpler and more terrifying than any theory they could construct. You just stopped giving power to their opinions. You stopped measuring your worth by their metric. You stopped playing a game you never agreed to play. You opted out of the entire system of seeking external validation. And when you did that, you became untouchable. And untouchable people make everyone else question the chains they're still wearing. Here's where it gets really interesting. The people who are most disturbed by your transformation, the ones losing sleep over what you've become, they're revealing themselves in real time. Because comfortable people don't get triggered by other people's growth. Secure people don't feel threatened by other people's evolution. The ones spiraling, the ones obsessively checking your activity, the ones crafting elaborate theories about your downfall or your deception, those are the people whose entire identity was built on you staying beneath them. They needed you small so they could feel big. They needed you struggling so they could feel stable. They needed you seeking approval so they could feel superior by withholding it. Your transformation didn't just change you, it destroyed their entire psychological framework. And now they're scrambling to rebuild a worldview that makes sense without you playing your assigned role as their emotional support victim. The comments sections wherever your name appears are absolutely unhinged right now. You've got people writing paragraphs analyzing your energy. You've got amateur psychologists trying to diagnose what happened. You've got former acquaintances pretending they always knew you had this in you, rewriting history to claim they saw it coming. You've got people who ghosted you suddenly interested again, not because they care, but because they're terrified of being on the wrong side of your story. You've got strangers defending you against people who don't even know you, just because your vibe resonates with something in them. You've become a Rorschach test. People project their own fears, desires, insecurities, and aspirations onto you. And what they see when they look at you tells them more about themselves than it ever could about you. Let's address the elephant in the digital room. There are people right now claiming they were always on your side. People who were silent during your struggles are now writing think pieces about your brilliance. People who questioned your choices are now claiming they understood your vision all along. People who distanced themselves when you weren't successful enough are now trying to slide back into your orbit. And this performative revisionist history is one of the most telling aspects of what you've created. Because you didn't just change yourself, you changed how people remember you. You retconned their entire narrative, and now they're desperately trying to rewrite their own role in your story to avoid being cast as the villain or the fool. But here's the thing. You remember. You remember every silence. You remember every dismissal. You remember every moment you needed support and got judgment instead, and your memory is the one archive they can't edit. The shift in how people address you now compared to before is almost comical if it wasn't so revealing. Messages that used to be dismissive or condescending are now cautiously respectful. People who used to speak to you like you were beneath them are now watching their tone. Even the way strangers interact with your content has changed. There's a wariness now, a recognition that you're not someone who can be casually disrespected without consequence. Not because you threaten anyone, but because your energy communicates that you've transcended the need to argue with people operating at frequencies you've already outgrown. You don't fight anymore. You just exist at a level where their attacks can't reach. And that untouchable quality is more intimidating than any aggressive response could ever be. Here's what's really cooking people's minds right now. You're not bitter. That's the part they can't process. They threw everything at you, directly or indirect. Betrayal, abandonment, mockery, doubt, dismissal. And you absorbed it all, processed it in private, and emerged without visible rage. You're not on a revenge tour. You're not naming names. You're not exposing receipts. You're not even subtly jabbing at people through cryptic posts. You just moved forward, carrying lessons instead of grudges, carrying wisdom instead of wounds. And that lack of bitterness, that refusal to be consumed by what was done to you, is more powerful than any call-out, post, or public dragging could ever be. Because it means they don't live rent-free in your head. They're not even squatting in a corner. They've been evicted entirely. And being forgotten by someone you wronged hits different than being hated. The energy shift around you is palpable, even through screens. People who interact with you now report feeling something they can't quite articulate. Some call it intimidating, some call it inspiring, some call it unsettling, but they all feel it. It's the energy of someone who has died and resurrected multiple times in private. It's the energy of someone who has sat with their darkest thoughts and made peace with their shadows. It's the energy of someone who has nothing left to prove because they already proved everything to the only person whose opinion matters, themselves. This isn't confidence. Confidence can be shaken. This is certainty. Certainty that you'll be fine regardless of who stays or leaves, regardless of who celebrates or criticizes. That certainty is a frequency most people never reach, and when they encounter it, they don't know whether to bow or run. Now we need to talk about what you've accidentally created. A movement, not an intentional one, not a branded one, but a psychological movement. Because there are people watching your journey who see themselves in your transformation. People who are tired of performing, tired of shrinking, tired of seeking validation from sources that will never satisfy. Your example, not your words, just your example, is giving people permission to evolve without apology. You've become proof that it's possible to walk away from toxicity without explanation, to rebuild in silence without documentation, to emerge transformed without needing anyone's approval of the process. And that permission that living proof, is spreading through the internet like a virus. A beneficial virus, but a virus nonetheless. They're not, you're infecting people with the possibility of their own liberation. The haters are in a particularly difficult position right now, because to hate you effectively, they need you to react. They need you to engage.